My father was dying, and the room felt like it was holding its breath with him. Machines beeped softly. The family stood gathered around his bed, siblings, aunts, uncles, all pretending to be united for the final hours of a man they had quietly abandoned long before his heart began to fail. I held his hand tightly, tears slipping down my face as his breathing slowed. My wife stood at the back of the room, silent, unreadable, her eyes fixed on the floor. Everyone waited for my father's last words, a blessing, a goodbye, a memory. Instead, he opened his eyes with sudden clarity, scanned the room and looked past all of us, straight at my wife. A faint, strange smile curved on his lips. A smile none of us had ever seen on him. And in a weak, cracking whisper he said, "Finally you know what you want. But you don't know what awaits you." The room froze. My wife's head jerked up, her face draining of color. She took a half-step back as if his words had physically struck her. I wiped my face. "Dad, what does that mean?" But he wasn't looking at me anymore. He wasn't looking at anyone. His eyes stayed fixed on her, steady, knowing, almost warning. My wife whispered, barely audible, "Oh God." And before I could ask another word, my father's hand went limp in mine. His final message wasn't for me. It was for her. And in that moment, a cold truth settled in my chest. My father died knowing something about my wife. That I didn't. The room erupted into crying, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I couldn't stop replaying the way my father looked at her, not confused, not delusional, but aware. As if he had been waiting for that exact moment to speak directly to my wife. She slipped out of the room quietly, hoping no one noticed. I noticed. I watched her fingers tremble as she pushed the door open and disappeared into the hallway. My brother hugged me, my mother sobbed into my shoulder, but nothing reached me. My father's words had carved themselves into me like a warning. You don't know what awaits you. Minutes later, when the crowd thinned, I left the room to find her. She stood alone near a window, arms wrapped around herself, breathing fast. "Why did he look at you like that?" I asked. She didn't turn around. "Ethan, your father was confused. He was dying. He didn't know what he was saying." "That wasn't confusion," I said. "He recognized you. He meant something." She didn't answer. I stepped closer. "What does he know about you?" She finally turned, her eyes red, but not from crying, from panic. "I think we should focus on your family right now," she whispered. Not whatever that was. But I had lived with my father my whole life. And I had never seen him look at someone the way he looked at her. That wasn't confusion. It was certainty. Before I could ask more, my cousin approached. "Ethan, they need you inside." I looked back at my wife. She was already walking away. Avoiding me. Avoiding the truth. And that was the moment suspicion began to grow. Strong enough to follow. For the next 2 days, the house filled with relatives offering condolences, food, sympathy, everything except peace. But my mind wasn't on grief anymore. It was on her. My wife moved through the house like a ghost avoiding sunlight. She avoided my eyes, avoided my family, avoided any room I entered. She kept her phone close, screen always turned away from me. Suspicion didn't grow quietly. It grew like a fire catching dry leaves. On the third night, after everyone fell asleep, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, her hands trembling. "Tell me what my father meant," I said. She jolted. "Ethan, please stop asking. Your dad didn't even like me. Maybe he just wanted to hurt you before he died." "No," I said. "He never lied on his deathbed." She closed her eyes, shoulders shaking. That was the first crack. The second came the next morning. I went to pick up my father's belongings from the hospice facility. A nurse pulled me aside. "Your wife was here," she said gently. "She visited your father alone. Twice." My stomach dropped. "When?" I asked. "Both times were late," she answered. "She didn't sign in, but we remember her." She seemed upset. Upset. Secretive. Fearful. Why would my wife visit my dying father alone? Why didn't she tell me? Driving home, my hands tightened around the steering wheel. Every memory of the last month replayed in a new light. Her late-night walks, her sudden nervousness, her excuses. My father's final words weren't random. He had seen something. Something she never wanted me to know. And I was going to find out. That night, after the house quieted again, I walked into our bedroom and found her sitting on the edge of the bed, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked up at me like she expected a verdict. "We need to talk," I said. Her eyes dropped. "Ethan, please don't make this harder." "Harder than what?" I asked. "Harder than lying to my father?" Harder than visiting him secretly? Harder than whatever he knew about you. She winced like the words themselves hurt. Your dad, she whispered. He said something to me during those visits. My pulse tightened. What did he say? She swallowed hard. He told me I needed to do the right thing before it destroyed you. Destroyed me how? She shook her head desperately. I can't, Ethan, please. I thought I could handle this myself. I thought I could protect you. I stepped closer. Protect me from what? Tears filled her eyes, but not the kind born from grief, the kind born from guilt. I made a mistake, she whispered. A long time ago. One I prayed would stay buried. My jaw clenched. What kind of mistake? She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, her phone buzzed violently in her hand. She froze. One glance at the screen and her entire body went rigid. I took a step forward. Who is that? She locked her phone instantly, hiding the screen against her chest. No one, she said too quickly. But her shaking voice gave her away. And so did the name I glimpsed before she hit it. Mr. Hayes, final notice. My blood ran cold. My father's warning wasn't metaphorical. It was literal. Something was coming. Something tied to her mistake. Something tied to a man named Hayes. And whatever awaited me, she had known all along. Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. I reached out slowly. Give it to me. No, she whispered, backing away. Ethan, please, not this. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't push. Didn't touch her. I simply held out my hand. She stared at it like it was a cliff edge. Then, defeated, she placed the phone in my palm. The lock screen flashed once, and the notification appeared again. Mr. Hayes, final notice, 48 hours left. My stomach tightened. I opened her messages. She didn't stop me. Threat after threat. Payments. Reminders. Demands. Each one colder than the last. And then the truth hit me like a blow to the chest. These weren't new messages. They stretched back years. My father hadn't warned me out of confusion. He knew. My wife collapsed into the chair behind her, covering her face. I was going to tell you, she sobbed. I just couldn't. I scrolled. The amount owed wasn't small. It wasn't something a scared person paid quietly. It was extortion. Who is he? I asked. She looked up, eyes full of dread. Someone who shouldn't be alive. I froze. She continued, voice trembling uncontrollably. Ethan, when I was younger, before we met, I did something stupid. I got involved with the wrong person. Dangerous. I tried to leave, but he threatened to expose everything, unless I paid him. My heart pounded. Expose what? Her mouth opened, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she whispered, Your father told me the same thing he told you. You don't know what awaits you. She wiped her eyes. And he said Mr. Hayes wasn't done yet. I stared at her. My dying father's last words weren't a riddle. They were a countdown. And we had just run out of time. I didn't speak. Not for a full 30 seconds. Because everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about my wife, about my father's dying warning, was rearranging itself into something far darker. I finally asked, Why didn't you tell me years ago? She let out a broken breath. Because I thought he would go away if I kept paying. Because I was ashamed. Because I knew if you ever found out, you'd look at me exactly the way you're looking at me right now. I didn't answer. There were no words that wouldn't make things worse. Instead, I kept scrolling. And there it was, the message that made my blood turn to ice. If your husband doesn't pay by Friday, I talk. Everything. No exceptions. Friday was tomorrow. I set the phone down slowly. You said he shouldn't be alive, I said. Explain. She stood, pacing in small steps like a trapped animal. Years ago, she whispered, I reported him. He was arrested. The police told me he died in custody. I believed them. For years. And yet he's texting you. She nodded, trembling. He wants money, but he also wants revenge. He said he'd ruin your life just to get to me. I absorbed that in silence. My father's strange smile. His final stare at her. His warning. It wasn't symbolic. It was literal. He knew Hayes was coming. I turned toward the window, the city lights reflecting off the glass like a map of possibilities. Ethan, she whispered, voice cracking, what are you thinking? I exhaled slowly. Something I should have done the moment Dad spoke those words. She stepped closer, terrified. And what's that? I turned to her. The name Hayes carried a weight I couldn't shake, like something rotten buried under floorboards. I sat in my father's old study, the room still smelling faintly of cedar and the aftershave he used for 40 years. His files were stacked neatly on shelves, organized with the precision only he possessed. If my father had warned her, if he had looked at her that way, then somewhere in this room was the reason why. As I searched through the drawers, my wife hovered near the doorway, twisting her wedding band over and over. "Ethan, maybe we should go to the police," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "Not until I understand what you're truly hiding." Her eyes filled with panic. "I told you everything." "No," I replied. "You told me the part that hurts you, not the part that destroys me." And then, I found it. A thin folder labeled simply, "It's Hayes." My father had kept documents, old reports, names, incident histories, all tied to a man who was not supposed to exist anymore. But the shock wasn't the file. It was the photo inside. My wife, younger, standing next to Hayes. Not forced, not threatened, smiling. She gasped when she saw what I was holding. "Ethan, that's not what it looks like." I held up a hand. My voice didn't rise, didn't crack. "Tell me why my father had this." She covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. "Because," she whispered, "your father knew me long before you did." The floor seemed to drop beneath me. I stared at her. She wasn't done. "And Ethan, there's something else I never told you." She took a step back, trembling. "Hayes, he isn't coming for me." She lifted her eyes to mine. "He's coming for you." For a long moment I just stared at her. "No more riddles," I said. "Tell me everything. Now." She sank into a chair, her voice barely holding together. "Your father wasn't warning me that night," she whispered. "He was warning you, because Hayes blames you for something he thinks you did." My stomach tightened. What could I have done? I never met the man. She shook her head. "Not directly. Years ago your father worked a case. A financial one. Hayes was laundering money through shell companies. Your father built the evidence that put him in prison. But Hayes, he believed someone betrayed him. He believed the Price family ruined him." I froze. She continued, her hands trembling violently. "He thought I was connected to your father. That's why he targeted me first. But once he found out I married into your family, everything changed. The extortion wasn't about me anymore." The truth clicked into place with a sickening weight. Hayes had been circling us for years, waiting, planning, counting down. My father's final smile wasn't cruel. It was a message, a passing of a burden, a warning wrapped in love. I stood, walked to the window and stared out at the quiet street. "When does Hayes want the money?" I asked. "Tomorrow," she whispered. I nodded. "Good." She looked at me confused. "Good? Ethan, what are you?" "I'm not giving him a cent," I said softly. "But I am giving him exactly what he's been waiting for." She stepped forward, terrified. "Which is what?" I turned to her, calm, the same calm my father carried when he knew he had already won. "Closure." The next morning Hayes arrived expecting money. What he got instead was the full weight of every federal charge my father documented, hand-delivered to the agents who had been waiting for my call. Hayes was arrested before he even reached our door. My father's warning had been real. But so was his justice.